We have a lot to chat about today, so let's start with today's market moves with a good friend of the ticker, Alfred Eskandar, Salt Financial President and Chief Operating Officer. Alfred, good to see you again. I know it's been a little bit of time. Yesterday, we saw a nice pop in the markets. Today, fairly flat right now. What are you making from today's moves?
Well, I mean, the pop was over the optimism of a stimulus package, and obviously the president coming out of the hospital was another good signal. So the market embraced it. Today, I think it's more of a question around, the volatility, the reality of the volatility you're going to have to deal with going into the election. And we saw the majority of sectors actually pull back, except for the three you mentioned earlier, which were financial, industrials, and energy. But those for the year continue to be pretty beaten up. So it's nice to see them get a little bit of a kick.
So, Alfred, you did mention the elections. I will get to that in just a moment, but want to ask you about some of the comments that we heard from Jay Powell, essentially undercutting that argument that we've often heard from Republicans about a smaller stimulus package. The White House did a counterproposal of that $2.2 trillion package from the Democrats, $1.6 trillion from the White House. I'm wondering if what you make of Jay Powell's comments, and if you think the markets right now are considering stimulus a foregone conclusion, especially after we've had a couple of months now where negotiations essentially have been stalled.
Yeah, I think if you compare, sort of side by side with the exception of the overall size, there's a lot of similarities. The big one that really stands out would be the $400 versus $600 a week that the Republicans are offering versus the $600 that the Dems would prefer. And I think Powell's comments are directly contrary to what the White House has been saying about we don't necessarily need it. We have an economy that is improving. 400 is sufficient. So I think he's probably going to hear some tweets or, from the president about that specific comment. That being said, the number of 1.6 trillion is tremendous. And obviously 2.2 is greater. So I think the market is pricing in a substantial stimulus. And what they're hearing from the Fed is that it is needed. It is something that will clearly be beneficial to help the economy recover at a faster pace.
So on the note of elections, which you did mention, we've been talking to a couple of people, and we, of course, keep continuously asking essentially the question I'm asking you, which is how much volatility are we going to be seeing around the election? And folks keep saying, listen, make sure not to overplay politics, particularly when we consider the market's moves. But even taking that into consideration, how volatile do you think markets are going to be getting ahead or even right after the election?
Well, they're pretty volatile right now. If you recall back in April, March, the VIX was north of 45 and it's roughly 28 now. Looking at the VIX futures for November and December, you see an expected level of elevation, and whether that's around the contested outcome of the election. God knows what's ultimately, going to progress or if there's another setback with COVID. So there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty for sure. So we do see that VIX levels and volatility going into the end of the year are going to remain elevated. That being said, there's a number of things that investors can do to kind of help protect themselves against some of this volatility. And the good news for investors is that you don't necessarily have to be a massively sophisticated trader to benefit from hedging and buffer strategies that are aimed to kind of protect you in these volatile times. I mean, there's actual products now, like the Direction Dynamic Hedge product that will actually do that for you. There's buffer products that will actually, protect you from the first, 9 or 10% of a market pullback. So the good news is there are products for investors to lean on to help get them some protection in these volatile months coming up.
Do you think that markets have baked in a Biden victory, a blue wave? We're seeing the polls showing that Joe Biden right now is expanding his lead over President Trump.
Yeah, the good news for the Biden campaign is the perceived lead seems to be getting bigger. Whether you look at the CNN poll or even the Fox News poll, they've got Vice President Biden building on his lead, where CNN, I believe, has him up by 16 points versus Fox's 14 points. Either one is a tremendous margin. And even if you factor in the margin of error, there's still nearly double digits that the vice president seems to be ahead of Trump right now.
All right. So, Alfred, I was reading your note, and you say that tech continues to drive returns. I was looking today, however, we are seeing financial ETFs performing well. I'm wondering if investors should really start considering to look more and more at value.
Well, value and small caps seem to be working together right now, which is not something that has worked all year. Again, I go into sort of what is the risk appetite for the particular investor? Are you matching up that risk appetite with the appropriate mix of products? I mean, financials are up roughly 10% in the last week or so of trading, but they've been down all year and they're still net down for the year. So a lot of times when you have a few sectors that have really pulled away, the ones that have been really beaten down become a little bit more attractive as the investor takes some of the money off of the big winners and starts buying some of these sectors or ETFs that have been pretty beaten up for the year.
All right. Well, we will leave that there. Alfred Eskandar, Salt Financial President and Chief Operating Officer. Always good chatting with you. Hopefully it won't be a whole month before I get to talk to you again. Thanks so much.
Good to be with you again, Kristen.
Hey investors, Zach Guzman here. Are you interested in learning more about the markets and getting the latest financial news? Well, then click right here to subscribe to our Yahoo Finance YouTube channel. Get the latest up-to-the-minute market analysis, big interviews in the world of finance, and information on how to manage your money every day wherever you are.